Former officer unrepentant as he gets nearly 5 years in George Floyd killing. The last former Minneapolis police officer convicted in state court for his role in George Floyd's death is sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison. Thao, the last former Minneapolis police officer convicted in state court for his role in the killing of George Floyd, was sentenced Monday to 4 years and 9 months in prison. Thao had testified that he merely served as a human traffic cone when he held back concerned bystanders who gathered as one of his colleagues, former officer Derek Chauvin, who was white, knelt on Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes while the black man pleaded for his life May 25th, 2020. Again, the evidence didn't show Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck. Even the state's own experts would testify in the actual trial, the neck area, the shoulder and back. A bystander video captured Floyd's fading cries of "I can't breathe." Floyd's murder. Again, this is a artifact of Minnesota law. They call what every other state would call reckless manslaughter, they call it a reduced degree of murder. There was no murder here in the classic sense of an intentional killing. Even Derek Chauvin was never charged with an intentional killing. But because of that vagary of Minnesota law, the progressive press gets to call Floyd's death a murder. In every other state, it would have been a manslaughter at worst. Floyd's murder touched off protests worldwide and forced a national reckoning on police brutality and racism. At his sentencing hearing, Thao said he never intended to hurt anyone that day. He spoke at length about his growth as a Christian during his 340 days behind bars, but denied any responsibility for Floyd's death, as well he should. None of those officers were responsible for Floyd's death beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the legal threshold for guilt in America in criminal court. In rambling remarks full of biblical references, he drew parallels with the sufferings and false accusations endured by Job and Jesus. As well, to his credit, folks, this is a man who's been railroaded. A lot of people would just have collapsed in terms of their ego, their personality. Their whole world is destroyed. This guy, his center still stands. He knows he did nothing wrong. He could have fallen to his knees and begged for mercy from this judge, Peter Cahill. And maybe he would have gotten a substantially lesser sentence. Certainly, as we'll see in the video clip I have, Judge Cahill was apparently looking for that, begging. But of course, Thao did nothing to beg for. And he's strong enough to recognize that. And he'll probably come out okay as a human being after all this, after his 5+ years wrongfully imprisoned. I did not commit these crimes, Thao said. My conscience is clear. I will not be a Judas nor join a mob in self-preservation or betray my God. Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill, who found Thao guilty in May of aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. By the way, that was a bench trial. And Judge Cahill's finding of guilt involved a 177-page court order. Amazing. How complicated. If Thao is guilty of this crime, why would it take 177 pages to explain that? You need 177 pages to obfuscate the failure of the state to actually prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt here. So Cahill found Thao guilty in May of aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter, said he was hoping for more than preaching from Thao on Monday. After 3 years of reflection, I was hoping for a little more remorse, Cahill said. Cahill then sentenced Thao to 57 months, the top end of the range recommended under state guidelines, where the standard sentence is 48 months, in even 4 years. The sentence Cahill handed down was more than the 51 months the prosecutors had sought, and more than the 41 months requested by Thao's attorney, Robert Paul. Thao's sentence will run concurrently with a 3.5-year sentence for his separate conviction on a federal civil rights charge, which an appeals court upheld on Friday. Thao will be returned to federal prison to finish that sentence before he's transferred to a Minnesota state prison to serve out the remaining few months It's not a few months, it's another couple of years, with credit for time served, the 340 days served. Defense attorney Paul, who in court called Thao a good and decent man with a family, almost certainly true, said afterward that they will appeal in both the state and federal cases. He declined further comment. I mean, there's hardly any point. As you've heard me say 1,000 times, folks, appeals are for losers. Assistant Attorney General Erin Eldridge, some of you may remember her from the Chauvin trial. Nasty piece of work. Said during the hearing that Floyd's final words reverberated across the globe. That's political talk, folks. That's not legal talk. More from her. George Floyd narrated his own death over the course of a restraint that lasted more than 9 long minutes until he lost consciousness, stopped breathing, and his heart stopped beating. Maybe the 3 times fatal level of fentanyl did that. Stopped his breathing. Fentanyl kills people by stopping their breathing. Maybe the 90% coronary artery occlusion of his heart and his decision to spike his adrenaline by fighting lawful arrest for 10 minutes. Maybe that's what stopped his heart from beating. Erin Eldridge continues, Thao facilitated Floyd's death because he stood by and allowed it to happen and stopped others from helping the dying man, including a Minneapolis firefighter who was a trained emergency medical technician and could have performed CPR on him. Why would you have performed CPR when, except for the last couple minutes, Floyd was talking? You don't perform CPR on someone who's talking. And the police had already called, these 4 police convicted in the death of George Floyd. They'd all called EMS already. EMS was on the way. I guess they wanted EMS there just to collect the body. Is that what we're supposed to believe? They knew they were killing someone and they called EMS?